Let's talk about the housing market today. As you know, the economy is in a very difficult time right now, a very unique stage in the economy, something we haven't seen really ever, with inflation where it's at, with where monetary policy has been, fiscal policy has been, the pandemic, inventory levels in housing, things like that. A very unique time. And as you know or may not know, if you're new to the channel, I've been a full-time entrepreneur since 1997. That's when I started my entrepreneurial journey full-time. And I started out as a remodeling handyman contractor, became a builder developer, had a real estate firm, had real estate licenses in several states, a lot of agents working for me, investor, developer, also started a bunch of companies, built them up, sold them off. Over the years, over the last 25 years, hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate deals, commercial, residential, all types of properties, all types of different businesses. And I consult and work with people all over the world now doing all kinds of things. And one of the things out there right now that is of great concern is the housing market. And if you've been following the channel and following me, you know that I've been talking about a correction in housing since the end of last year, earlier this year, when the markets peaked. And there were a lot of channels over the last couple of years calling for a housing crash due to the pandemic and all the inventory that they said would hit the market because of the forbearance program and things like that, that people would be losing their houses and stuff. And I said, I did not agree with that, that this is a very different borrower profile than we saw in 2008 and 9. I was hot and heavy in real estate development in 2008 and 9 when the financial collapse happened. That's the first time I entered financial markets, the stock market, at the bottom of 2009, and made some big moves. And then again, back in the pandemic of 2020, I like to buy at the bottoms of the markets and make big moves and just kind of let it ride, get out at the top. And as you know, I exited most of my positions at the end of last year before the markets tanked, and now I've been playing them in and out. But anyways, back to housing. So in 2008 and 9, that was a banking crisis. That was a liquidity crisis. That was the inability to borrow money, which ultimately tanked the housing market. There were a lot of interest-only loans, so interest rates jacked up, which created problems for borrowers. And then, of course, it was the subprime lending market, people borrowing money that weren't qualified, that ultimately took the market down. But it was leverage. It was leverage in the system because of what the Fed had done in terms of, and the government had done in terms of trying to encourage home ownership and creating all these exotic loan products and things like that, packaging them together, selling them on Wall Street and levering those instruments up hundreds of times. So there were probably hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of bad leverage in the market, toxic assets, things like that. And that's what took down the housing market back in 2008 and 9. And we saw values collapse literally overnight. The housing market came to a halt literally overnight. You could not give a house away in a lot of markets, much less sell them. And it took a lot of time for that to recover. It took about 12 to 14 years for that market to really recover. And then what we've seen in the last 2 years has been really, really interesting, and I think has surprised a lot of people in terms of the lack of inventory. We've never seen inventory levels anything near like what they've been the last couple of years, and interest rates as low as they've been. Obviously, we've never seen that, which obviously created a bubble. So the disagreement that I had, obviously, going back to the last couple of years, was that we were not going to see a bunch of foreclosures. We were not going to see those properties that were in forbearance. Those were strategic cash flow issue or cash flow strategies that people were entering into forbearance because anybody could. There was no penalties, no dings to your credit. You were basically deferring your payments for a year, 18 months, 24 months, in some cases, putting it to the back of the loan. You could refinance in the interim, pull equity out, reduce your interest rate. So why not take advantage of that during the pandemic when things were so uncertain? So those were not borrowers that were going to end up in default. And I'm sure, once the forbearance on evictions and things like that were lifted and foreclosures were lifted, we saw a few, but again, the borrower profile is much different this time around than it was last time. So what I've always said is what's going to create a correction in housing is interest rates. As soon as interest rates get over 5%, that is going to start the correction. If it gets up in the upper 5s into 6, that's lights out for the housing market. Why? Because of the affordability index. And I've talked several times about the impact on that, but basically rates are double almost what they were in the pandemic. So the affordability of that borrower has been cut in half. And we're already seeing that with new home builders. That's the first place it shows up, is in the new home builders. Then it shows up, well, it shows up mortgage applications first. Your refinance applications are in the tank right now. Their demand is almost non-existent for refi. Just doesn't make any sense. New purchase mortgage applications are down 30-40%, if not more, across the board. Mortgage companies are laying off all across the country. So there's there's a lot less demand for new purchase applications, and then transactions are down across the board, probably 30-40% nationwide. And you're hearing, nobody visiting open houses, and especially with new home builders, that's where stress is going to show up first, is with new home builders, because they have such a lagging time frame from the time their buyers contract for that home. If they're building, that way for buyers, if they're doing it on spec, still takes 6 to 8 months to get those houses completed. So the buyers that were contemplating purchasing that home that could qualify 6 months ago can't qualify now. So a lot of deals are falling through. Builders are seeing traffic, non-existent, if not, cut way down, and houses sitting on the market much longer. So you'll see the builders start to lower prices, cut inventory. You'll see secondary markets, resort rental markets, like where I started my career on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You will see inventory start to build up in those markets. You'll see days on market start to go up, and you'll see big price reductions, which we're already seeing in that market. I still follow that market very closely. I do a lot of things there still. So I've been watching that exact thing happen. Big price reductions. And you can see that nationwide. If you go on Zillow and just pick your market and start watching housing, you can set up alerts and you'll see big price reductions happen. Of course, a lot of that's because prices were way overpriced to begin with. People were just putting them out at crazy numbers, and hey, if I get an offer, then great. So you're going to see a lot of price reductions just in general, because a lot of stuff is just well overpriced anyways, and pushing. But now with interest rates where they're at in the mid to upper fives and going into the 6% range, once we cross over 6, that will be lights out for the market and could potentially cause a much deeper correction in pricing across the country. Now, this is all obviously real estate's hyper local, so every market's different and conditions are different for every market. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about first-time home buyers, move-up home buyers, and things like that, it's an affordability equation. And as interest rates go up, house prices go down. As interest rates go down, house prices go up. That's what we've seen. That's what we've experienced, and that's been the primary cause of the rapid inflation in housing prices. Of course, the inventory levels have been a big issue as well. But we're going to see some of that relieved, because inventory levels are rising across the country. It's going to continue to rise as rates go up. Home builders have a record number of houses in the pipeline. Well, not record, but the highest levels we've seen in a number of years. Close to record high levels, getting close to what they were pre-2008-9 crash. That was another issue back then, was there were tons of housing being built that were in the pipeline. So that affected things in 2008-9 as well, because we had a ton of inventory. And then when the banking crisis happened and the mortgage market collapsed, that just compounded things. This time we don't have a banking mortgage crisis. We have a liquidity crisis, because lending is going to become more stringent and more expensive, and inventory is rising into that. So let's take a look at a couple of things, and you can look at some of these resources. Like I've got Zillow right here, where it's talking about home values and sales forecasts for 2022, and Zillow forecasts 11.6% home value growth over the next 12 months. Through 2023, 5.73 million existing homes for sale expected in 2022, a 6.4% decrease. So they're already, projecting that sales are down. So that'd be down from a year ago, where the forecast of 14.9% growth in March, and Zillow expects home values to grow by 5.2%, down from the expected 5.5% growth from the month-over-month forecast. Existing home sales have been lowered as well, predicting 5.73 million in 2022, and it's a decrease of 6.4%. So you can already see that sales transactions are already declining. And again, you can see this in other markets. Housing market is competitive as ever, even though soaring costs. This is from April, an article in May with April reports. Problem with housing is that it's all lagging. So we're seeing real-time demand destruction in housing on transactions and on mortgage applications because of rates. A lot of these articles are a month old, but even a month ago, we were already starting to see a correction. but it takes time. These things are lagging, and the housing market, from a seller standpoint, like I said, builders, they can dump inventory quick because they are in business, they're public companies, and they can afford to take a hit and just reduce inventory. Resort markets are all about cash flow, so you'll see those houses sit, and that's typically an unmotivated seller's market, especially recently. If anybody's bought in the last few years because they have or refinance, they have record low interest rates, they have great cash flows, so they're not motivated. Those markets have always been, hey, I'll put it out there a price. If I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. So, very difficult markets, but that's where you'll see inventory levels stack up, and that's where you'll see prices reduce. But this is the National Association of Realtors, where you can get a lot of really good reports in terms of the housing affordability index, pending home sales, those types of things. Pending home sales were down 3.9% month over month. So we're already starting to see that, and it could show you geographically where those sales are, down as well. Realtor.com, May 2022 monthly housing market trends report: the inventory of homes for sale increased for the first time since June 2019. The national inventory of active listings increased 8% over last year, while the total inventory of unsold homes, including pending listings, still declined by 3.9% due to a decline in pending inventory. The inventory of active listings was down 48.5% compared to May 2020, in the early days of COVID pandemic. And in other words, there are still only half as many homes available. So inventory levels are still at record lows, but they are increasing. And again, it's going to take time. It's probably, we won't see significant changes unless rates get over 6% here in the, near interim. But if they do get to that level by the end of the year, you'll see significant changes, and it'll start to pick up more and more. And we're going into the summer, which is traditionally slower for the housing market. You typically see less activity in the summer. So if interest rates go up and you add the summer, lack of activity, then you should see days on market start to increase, price reductions, and inventory levels climb. More new listings entered the market in May than any other month since July or June of 2019. Newly listed homes were up 6.3% nationally compared to a year ago, and up 4.6% for larger metros over the last year. Sellers still listed at rates 6.4% lower than typical 2017 to 2019 levels prior to the pandemic. Housing remains expensive and fast-paced, with the median asking price of a new home asking price of a new home at an all-time high, while time on the market is at a new low. The national median listing price of active listings was $447,000, up 17.6% compared to last year, and up 35% compared to 2020. So just been an incredible last couple of years in the housing market. So that's just unhealthy, unnatural, and that will unwind as interest rates continue to go up and things continue to open up from the pandemic. So it'd be really interesting to kind of watch. So again, realtor.com, another one. Redfin, another great resource for housing info. Reports of Austin, people priced out of Austin are relocating to San Antonio. So we're starting to see people move for housing options, for rent and for purchasing homes. Housing market update: the home buyers regain some control as supply grows and demand pulls back. More than 1 in 5 home sellers dropped their price, while several measures of home buyer demand posted the largest decline since spring of 2020. So, it's all over the news out there how, searches are down, traffic is down, just all kinds of stuff. So, first signs of a correction. Is it a crash? Absolutely not, but it's definitely a correction. And without rates getting up over 6%, then crash is not really on the table with these inventory levels. And moving on to Canada, sales in May are down 39% from last year, and prices are up almost 10% in Toronto. So I've been hearing reports out of Canada that the same thing's going to happen there because interest rates are rising, and we're starting to see price reductions. We're starting to see inventory levels grow and things like that. So Canada is similar in terms of the housing market in the United States. From a financing standpoint, it's all about the payment. People are buying payments in the first-time home buyer, move-up home buyer market. Obviously, there's still a lot of cash buyers out there in the market, and with record low inventory levels, they can still, have an advantage over buyers that are trying to get a mortgage. So from a housing crash standpoint, again, This is not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow. A correction is already underway. The correction will get deeper as rates go higher, faster. So depending on how high the rates go and how fast they rise, the market will affect, and react accordingly and inversely. So those are the things to keep an eye on in the housing market. And if you're in the market to buy for a primary residence, you'll see some significant changes. Well, this summer, because the housing market slows traditionally in the summer anyways, as interest rates go up, and towards the end of the year going into next year, as long as the rates continue to rise, which they probably will, most likely you'll see more and more of a correction, and there'll be opportunities out there to, be able to get a good deal, and it will switch from a seller's market to a buyer's market. And but it takes a while for sellers to adjust to new prices. So that typically takes time. Obviously 2008 and 9, it happened pretty quick, but even still, there were a lot of sellers that it took a year or more to adjust to where new pricing levels were, because we were at all-time highs in 2008 and 9 before the crash. And it took a number of years, about 10 to 12 years for those prices to get back to peak levels again before we had this run up here due to the pandemic. So very interesting times. Those are the things that I'm looking at in the housing market. I'll see you in the next video.